I mean, especially those of you working in the department, I cannot impress upon you strong enough the importance of theory. Nowhere in the world do you say text we are very close reading new critical approach. No one does that anymore. No one does that anymore. Of course, you can use it in certain parts because it will reveal something in your research. You know, this part I want to look closely. Like كل الدنيا, people make use of theory. You know, because theory is a tool that you have that you need to use. So reading is important. How to use theory is what I'm going to talk to you about a little bit more. Nora, you have a question or?
Yes. I was going to say why I found it problematic, which is because when I started, because my focus is theory, so I didn't know how to deal with this. Because my focus is ecofeminism. It's a different field, so it was very difficult for me to find a method.
Because you're doing criticism.
Yes.
Well, yes.
I ended up using the elements of ecofeminism for criticizing the theory. So
did it work? I mean, does it look like it's working?
it does, but it was tough because I was never told how to approach a theory. I always approached tests with theories. So this was the most difficult part.
Of course, this is not an exceptional situation. People who are working on criticism, pure criticism, it's much harder. I mean, with text analysis, you are taking the theory, you're applying rules of theory to the text. With criticism, you have to find yourself an approach that works, like a comparative or a chronological approach, or a development of a certain concept, thematic, for example, or comparative, or generic, you know, when this is applied to the novel, when it's applied to poetry, or geographical. I mean, you have to find a logic to approach those.
For example, like with ecofeminism, you could say something like your different manifestations of ecofeminism in the United States, in black women in the United States, with Caribbean feminism, ecofeminism, and then how ecofeminism is transported to Southeast Asia, for example. So that would be like Dr. Reed was saying, is geographical. You are still into theory and you are not dealing with text, but you are talking about the manifestations of different, the same theory, how it manifests itself in different geographical locations. But that, of course, comes early in the process of choosing a topic. Or how the idea, for example, comparatively, as Dr. Walid said, like how the idea of man, the agency of man, is manifest in the work of Derrida and then in the work of feminists or in the work of whatever. So it's a topic that you are investigating across different theories and you are still within theory.
Well, what I'm doing is comparing the two departing points. The ecofeminists have two departing points. One that identifies women with nature, and another one that says that no, this we identify women with nature, and this reinforces the dualism of man, nature, women, nature, and so on. So this is what.
So it's like two different manifestations of the same approach, two different sub-theories of. So it's comparative. It's comparative and generic in a way because you not really generic, but you're talking about the topic of nature and women. Nature and women here, and nature and women here, in the two manifestations of the theory. So it's a comparative thing.
Yeah.
This is your approach.
Okay, let me just go back to how you introduce your methodology in the proposal. Now, you submit a proposal to the department, and certain number of people, two of which are in this room, will jump at you because the methodology needs to be clarified. And basically, what are the general problems? Two areas you need to be aware of. First, you have to have a general framework, but you also want to detail the variety of that theoretical framework that you do. Yeah. I am going, in this piece of research, I am going to look, change things fall apart from a feminist perspective. Does that explain my methodology or not?
No. This is the general framework. This is the general framework. It doesn't tell whose feminism.
It's a very, 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 very wide framework. It does not specify, and remember, you are again addressing a community of scholars who know about theory, who know about research. So you can't just tell them feminism. What variety of feminism? You know, first wave feminism, second wave, third wave, and even within that, whose feminism? You know, I mean, Islamic feminism, Sufist feminism. You know, what variety? You have to specify what you are doing. You're looking at the two novels here as counter-colonial discourse. Clearly, you're going to use post-colonial theory. Who's post-colonial theory? You know, are you going to use something that was written early on? You know, are you going to look at theory that was written at the time of the writing of the novel, which makes sense? Or more modern theory? You know, is it Aimé Césaire, Fanon, or Edward Said, or someone else? You know, and why? You know, you have to be specific about your choice of framework and using this methodology, because this is one area. I think another area is often in the proposal, the candidate does not explain their tools. You don't explain the handy tools that you're going to use. Now, by virtue of choosing post-colonialism and a certain variety of post-colonialism, I'm going to use certain tools. You know, if you look at Fanon, you're going to refer to mimicry. If you look at Ashcroft, you're going to talk about transformation, interpretation, etc. If you use Marxist feminism, you're going to discuss base and superstructure. If you use Gramsci, you're going to use this concept of hegemony and ideology. You have to specify what tools you are going to use and how you're going to use them. Of course, you've asked your questions already. I'm going to approach my questions through these tools. So, first off, you don't want too general. You want to actually avoid generalizations. And you want to show how you're going to use that. Now, one of the major problems that gets a lot of criticism in many of the proposals submitted is that they tell you we're going to use this approach, but they don't tell you how. In the old days, you were supposed to submit at the end of a proposal a sample analysis. And the sample analysis would actually, I think it's a great idea, and I don't know why it was removed, but this is the format that we have now. It's supposed to show, you take a section from a novel and you analyze it the way you would analyze it to answer a specific question. We're talking about sample analysis novels. Now, you don't have this in the proposal, but you want to find a certain equivalent for it. You want to explain as much as you can that this is the variety of my methodology I'm going to use, and these are the tools that I'm going to use to approach my text. And that this is, of course, you have to justify your choice of theory. Right? As we talk about the methodology, why are you using post-colonialism and not new historicism? Why are you using feminism as opposed to post-structuralism? Again, I think the obvious is not explained. If it's very, very, very clear from my title and my choice of text that this should only be done with feminist theory, I don't need to explain it. But you may want to justify your choice of a certain period. You may want to justify a choice of a certain variety. You may want to justify why you're using third wave as opposed to second wave feminism. Because, I mean, these movements develop out of historical changes. So this could be more relevant to your work because it has points that reflect it in the text, or similar circumstances going on at the time of the writing and at the time of the theory emerging.
But in this part, the methodology, I don't have to mention because it was mentioned in the study. I don't have to mention that I chose third-wave feminism because of so and so, and second-wave feminism didn't like me, so I don't have to mention that, right? Because it's redundant, because I already said it in the scope.
No, in the methodology, I mean, in the scope you're saying I'm using this, not that. Now, here in the methodology, part of what you're doing is explaining why this is more relevant to your work.
And do I go into the other, like if you want to talk about post-colonialism and I'm talking about the other side?
Oh, you mean?
Do I get into the other words?
Why in the scope?
Yeah, no.
Oh,
Do I get into the why not methodology or no?
Well, see, Dalia, in as much as it is, as it sets off your own work, if you think that you need to justify the exclusion, justify. I mean, often you focus on what is positive, on I chose this because it will do this for my work. But if you think that excluding something is also good for your work, then say that I could not have used secondary feminism because it's more relevant. Or if it's I mean, depending on the topic, if it looks like you should have used second wave feminism and you're excluding it, you need to justify that.
Depends.
It's all a matter of logic. So here I'm specifically the variety of criticisms I'm using. I'm explaining my tools. I am also trying to identify and justify any shortcomings, if there are any. If you've used if you've chosen a certain methodology or a theoretical framework that may possibly prove problematic in one specific area, you want to explain that you're aware of this. بس مش aware وخلاص.
Aware that why am I using this?
Aware.
No,
How am I going to
justify
justify?
and aware, and I'm going to try and remedy this how. Okay? يعني it's like, I mean, ما ينفعش دكتور يقول لك أنا بديك الدواء ده هو هيجيب لك ضغط عالي. بس خلاص هيجيب لك ضغط عالي بس احنا مضطرين له وهيجي لك كذا. So this is the most appropriate method for my work. There is that problem area, however, I'm going to make up for it by. And by ده ممكن يبقى حاجات كتيرة جدا. Using the tools of another theory, combining two theories together. يعني أنا عايز أبص على a text by Jamaica Kincaid from a feminist point of view. But Marxism is very, very important here, so I'll use Marxist feminism. Okay? Now, there is such a thing as Marxist feminism, so maybe that's not a proper example. It's really when you, what Dr. Sello was talking about earlier on, that you use an eclectic approach, that I'm going to use the concepts or the ideology or the tools of this school, but my analysis will use the methods of this school, of this school. Or I'm going to combine them in this way. You have to identify gaps in your choice of the method, justify and try and remedy. Right? Like we were saying earlier on about the such questions, again, these tools are precisely what will guide you when you come to the chapterization later. Because use post-colonialism, you have to look at language and look at resistance. You have to look at, I mean, if you're using Ashcroft, say we're talking about interpolation, you know, I mean, this will be reflected again in your chapters in the end. You're going to use these tools to try and answer those questions which you asked before, and that is precisely what's going to dictate the chapterization in your thesis. Yeah? Questions about this?
I have a question. You said that we have to specify the tools. Okay, so how about if the theory I choose is still developing and doesn't show you or doesn't give you a certain strategy or a certain sort of set of steps that you need to follow when you're dealing with the literary text. And like, for example, if my research is trying to see whether it's applicable or not to literary texts, so is this fine? If I say this in the methodology part and I say that it's still developing, it's still, like, the theorists are still writing on it and theorizing on it, is this fine?
Okay, let me delay answering this question for a second and just explain that when we talk about tools, we're not necessarily talking about steps. You know, this is not, here's a checklist. If you follow this checklist, you will reach this result. This is not like that. One of the tools could be the strategies by which you approach the text. You look at resistance, you look at language, you look at interpolation, you look at geographical context. These are all, I mean, any approach in the world will approach its text in a certain way. And that's what makes it specific. If it is developing, if it is still defining its parameters, it is still got an approach. And that approach should be reflected in your work. If it does not have specific steps, fine, we're not doing science, we're not doing mathematics, right? We are, but feminism, بتبص على الدنيا ازاي؟
How women are portrayed in the
So the position of women in the world, cross-gender relationships, sexuality,
women's
exploitation, and social roles, etc., etc. Now, these are the tools, right? They're not steps. They're not steps like they are in structuralism. That you look at the signifier and the signified, and you define these in terms of present, and you look at the negative binaries and the positive binary. It's not like that. And some approaches will be like that, and that's fine. I mean, they're more clear-cut. But others will use certain tools that are not necessarily step-by-step tools, but are strategies, techniques, approaches, ideologies. I mean, this you need to clarify very much in your methodology. Questions about this? Okay, Dr. Randa will move on now to literature review.
Are you okay?
No.
we have bombarded you with information the past 4 hours or something. But well, I'm hoping you still can hold for some more time. The literature review is, of course, we have realized that there are differences between linguistics and literature, but generally speaking, what we need for a literature review is to situate our topic within a certain context of research. So, for example, I'm reading Chenwa Achebe and Taib Saleh, and I want to refer to what has been written before around my topic. So, has anybody dealt with Tayyip Saleh from a post-colonial perspective, dealt with season of migration to the north from a post-colonial perspective. What did they say? Okay. What did they say does not mean that I have to have read every single work that has been written, but that I have consulted the works and have an idea of what each work is saying. Okay, here I don't have to have exhaustive reading. Okay, later of course I will read exhaustively, but now what I'm doing is I am sort of coming out with a synopsis for each work, but I'm not writing my literature review to put this synopsis to the reader. It has to be a critical survey. So yes, this book talks about Tayyip Saleh's treatment of the topic of identity. Alright? So how does it treat identity, and how different is what I'm going to say about identity from what is going to be said, what was said in this work. So it's a sort of critical survey of the literature. It's not just statements or summarizing الكتاب ده بيقول كذا الكتاب ده بيقول كذا الكتاب ده بيقول كذا وبعدين لا الكتاب ده بيقول كذا and what I'm introducing is slightly different because I'm doing this and that. الكتب دي بتقول كذا بس however ما بصوش على المنطقة دي. So I am going to tackle this idea. الكتب دي اتعاملت مع التوبيك بس كانوا واخدين الموديل the earlier model by Frantz Fanon. Alright? So I'm doing it but I'm taking a different model. So each time I am reviewing a corpus of criticism or research that has been done on a topic similar to my topic, I'm always searching for where I am. Or how do I, what kind of gap do I fill in this? عشان كده احنا ما هواش literature review قد ما هو a critical survey of the literature. So I'm always looking at what went wrong here, how am I going to fill the gap here, what contribution do I add to these works, how useful these works have been. يعني مش لازم يبقى criticism all the time, just a negative criticism all the time. You know, this is an excellent study of كذا كذا that points out كذا كذا كذا, right? But I will develop on it عشان هقول. Alright, so it's not always have to be negative. So I'm talking about shortcomings, but I'm also talking about how useful they have been. The real problem with the مخطط that we have, I don't know if anybody has looked at this, بس في المخطط هم كاتبين حاجة that I really do not think we should take extremely literally, because they say إنه الدراسات السابقة بتقتصر على رسائل الماجستير والدكتوراه اللي اتكتبت حوالين الموضوع. يعني أنا في الريسيرش كوميونتي بتاعتي مثلا في جامعة القاهرة وجامعة عين شمس واسكندرية بدور أشوف إيه الرسائل اللي اتكتبت شبه الموضوع ده. This is important طبعا because first of all I need to know إذا كان الموضوع اتعمل ولا ما اتعملش. أنا ممكن أعرف الكتب لو دخلت على جوجل هيقول لي الموضوع ودخلت بالموضوع هيجيب لي الكتب اللي اسمها شبه ده أو حتى الأبحاث اللي مكتوبة، لكن أنا مش هعرف إذا كان في واحد في جامعة المنوفية أو في جامعة جنوب الوادي عامل التوبيك ده. طبعا it's my responsibility as a researcher to search، خصوصا لو حاسس إني بعمل حاجة مألوفة قوي، لو أنا جايبة حاجة فعلا حاسة إنها innovative، chances are that it has not been done before. But still it's my responsibility as a researcher, my sole responsibility، لأن لو بعد سنة ونص أو سنتين من الشغل اكتشفت إن حد خد ماجستير في الجامعة الفلانية في نفس موضوعي it will be a problem. طبعا the chances are very rare إنه يبقى بالضبط نفس التوبيك بنفس الكلمات. Okay, I can always modify, you know. مش modify عشان أكتب على حد، بس أنا اكتشفت في لحظة إن ده اتعمل، أخذ الكورس بتاع الريسيرش بتاعي في حتة تانية. Okay, يعني so as not to lose what I have done and at the same time not to replicate something that has been done. بس الفكرة إن إحنا هنا ده محتاج اعمله محتاج احطه في literature review بس that's not everything. I also need to refer to academic studies, research that has been published widely abroad or here in Egypt, not necessarily only theses. So although what is written here إنه يا إما يقتصر العرض على رسائل الماجستير والدكتوراه أو البحوث المنشورة في دوريات علمية يعني only periodical articles, journal articles, not books. I don't know why. مش عارفة إيه مشكلة البوكس بالذات. أو التقارير الفنية طبعا this is not part of our concern. So I don't know why they are excluding books, but I would say don't exclude books, and there will be no problem in adding something. Yeah, they're not even giving us the reason why books are excluded. Maybe it's typing error or something, I don't know. But in any case, I think what is important is to include theses. That is actually something you have to search. It's difficult in Egypt because we don't have databases, we don't have electronic databases. So usually you have a friend in Tanta, so you ask them to go to the Sat Lawali and skim through the record and see if a topic similar to yours has been registered or not. I think there is now a database. Yes. Yes, and it's a good one. And it's a good one. Yes, it's maybe you can get us. I think I accessed it once or twice from there. It's yes. So I mean, there is a chance that you can get. Maybe it's not totally updated, but it still gives you a good overview of what has been on. So, you can access and then get databases on things.
Just for a second, I think you should also keep yourself informed all the time because things do happen. Sometimes there is no database, and then a few months later, just don't count on the fact that there was no database when I started doing the research. Maybe later on there will be. I mean, I've seen recently a booklet of MA and PhD theses in the department that I've never seen before done together. Headings that you can look at instead of going to the shelves and looking at the theses themselves. So what's not there now, maybe there later. What's not there for Jamaat al-Qahira may be done by someone else, somewhere else. You need to search and research all the time.
Yes.
Okay, so in this case, do we include unpublished papers or?
Yes.
Because, for example, sometimes I attend things in the symposiums, seminars and stuff, and then they don't get published in the book.
You say it's a symposium presentation.
Yeah, just
you say it's a symposium presentation. But the citation would be a little bit different in that sense. You have to check. Dr. is going to speak in a minute about the bibliographies and the works cited. So I'm not sure actually how you can account for something like that. But maybe you need to see the manual that you're using, how the manual cites conference presentations. Yes, one last thing I want to say about the literature review before I hand over to Dr. Walid again is that again you have to keep in mind while you're doing the literature review what really distinguishes your research. So again, we did that in problem and importance of the research. We spelled out why our research is important, علشان ده كان كذا كذا, but without being repetitive, you are actually trying to focus or to point out from your critical survey of literature review, you also want to say why your work is different. So this work has been done, in this work there is a study of كذا and كذا. وفي الآخر خالص جملة كده عن how your research differs from these things. You don't have to repeat all over again, but just a reference to that. And now Dr. Walid takes over again.
Right. This is the last part of the presentation, and I'll very briefly look at the chapterization, bibliography, and the abstract, which we left off in the beginning. Just one very, very briefly about literature review. You do not want to write about everything that was written everywhere in the world, about your topic or your reason. I mean, a lot of literature reviews start with post-colonialism emerged in the... No, you're not doing that. I mean, again, logic. This is similar to my work, but mine is different because this is my edition. This is similar, and I'm going to use it, but it's not as comprehensive as mine. You know, I'm doing something just very vague. Now, the first thing that I want to talk to you about is tentative chapterization. And we've already referred to chapterization as we went along. But I want you to remember, keep remembering, that it's tentative. And tentative means it is subject to change. So don't feel that this is the only way that you can approach your text. We've seen a lot of people doing MAs or PhDs, the last minute dismantling the entire thesis and following a completely different structure. Of course, you have the analysis, you have the methodology, you have the objective. I mean, if you've done your work properly, you should have followed through with these throughout. But how do I divide it for maximum benefit, for maximum meaning, for maximum purpose? So remember that. The other thing that I want you to remember is it has to follow a logical system, some sort of logical system. You know, is it chronological? Is it done by genre? Is it done by element? Is it done thematically? Does a chapter look at language, another at setting, a third at etc.? And again, remember, a well-written proposal, the mirror في الآخر is your chapterization. You know, if you are aware of your objective, aware of your aim, you know what tools you're going to use, and you know what questions you're going to ask, the chapterization reflects that very clearly. So it shows the tools and the titles of the chapters, and it shows the questions in the issues that you're going to explore, etc., etc. Just remember, it's not separate from everything that you have said before. In fact, everything that you've said before is so in chapterization. Remember also, there needs to be balance. That you cannot have 3 chapters on language and then 1 chapter talking about historical background. There has to be balance. If you're using 2 texts, you cannot have 3 chapters on one and then 1 chapter on the other. Especially if you're doing something comparative. I want you to remember that the most boring chapterization when you're doing comparison is a chapterization that works on 1 text and then the other. You know? And it's like, why are you doing that today? Why don't you write 2 short pieces? Why don't you write 2 long papers? Why don't you do something else? I mean, the point about comparison is you are comparing, right? So you have to be aware of this in doing comparative studies. You don't want to divide your chapters. Of course you can. I mean, no one will tell you it's wrong, but it looks much better. It looks like you're more in control of your work when you approach it thematically, or through certain tools, or through certain aspects, rather than this author, I'm going to have that author. Okay? Like everything else, it stands revision, it stands suggestions, show it, advisor, show it to other people. Now, the bibliography, yes, please.
About the chapterization that we said before, that they are related to research questions, in the sense that they are responding somehow to the research questions. So you said in your research question something like, how does language, what role does language play in representing resistance? You know, how do the 2 protagonists react to colonial rupture, this kind of thing. So you can use your, or you'd better use your research questions in organizing your chapterization. So you write a chapter on language, for example. يعني لو اتفقنا ان احنا اول chapter بنعمله methodology مثلا. We are problematizing the use of our method or our critical method, and then I can combine, as Dr. Walid told you when he was talking about this, and I can combine مش كل حاجة في research question أعملها بشابتر، بس لو في حاجتين ثلاثة يتحطوا مع بعض resistance أخليهم chapter مثلا, and then something like that resistance actually would be a bigger thing, you know. But for example, something like syncretism, and then I talk about it in terms of language, in terms of identity, you know. So I have the concept of syncretism, and then within it there is language and identity, right? And then interpolation, and then I do something about interpolation. I talk about the form of the novel, for example, space and time. So I can, from my research questions, extract titles for my chapters.
قائمة المراجع, which is sometimes a bibliography and sometimes works cited.
By the way, I inquired from Dr. Usama because we were not
Did you
sure
check?
about that.
Check,
I checked
yes.
from Dr. Usama, who is responsible for this safari. He said only bibliography. Works cited within the bibliography, not indicated as works cited.
Okay. That said, I encourage you strongly at the time of writing your proposal to check very clearly if it is bibliography or a works cited. Now, what's the difference?
Works cited is this works cited within the proposal itself. Bibliography is everything I'm going to use.
So works cited is basically, I mean, these are different styles, and we'll talk about styles and manuals in a minute. Now, some people use works cited, which is basically only the works that you have cited or paraphrased or quoted in your text. Some use a bibliography, which is a working bibliography, you know, lots and lots and lots of works that were written about and around my topic, and I'm still at an early stage of the research, so I cannot decide. Some use works consulted, so there's works cited and works consulted, works that I've read, but I have not really quoted or paraphrased or summarized, but they are relevant. Now, what is required as of the time of this workshop is a bibliography that does not divide primary sources, secondary sources, etc., etc. I mean, again, these things have to be checked when you come to it. Sometimes they want primary separate from secondary source. Sometimes they want print material separate from online material. Sometimes they want, if you're using visual or audio material, it has to be done differently. Now, it depends what style sheet you're using, and it depends what the requirements are in the repository. What is important to remember is you have to be consistent from beginning to end. You have to use the same citation method. You have to use the same online manual. You have to use the same style sheet. Now, which style sheet do you use? I mean, most of us in literature, we use the Modern Language Association. Some people use the APA, you know, the American Psychology Association. In philosophy, in the social sciences, a lot of places now require the Chicago Manual, which is very, very similar to the MLA, except it takes the date to the beginning. You know, like MLA, if it gives you author, title, place of publication, publisher, date. Now the Chicago gives you author, year. You know, and it cites inside by author, year, rather than author, page number. Now, so many varieties. Now, you use what is suitable for your discipline. I know for the longest times we've asked contributors to the symposium proceedings to submit an MLA. Dr. Salo asks for APA. All right, like Chicago. No, Chicago Manual. Because that's what they use in the linguistics. Of course, if you're doing your proposal in with things you have to use what is understood by other people around you. I mean, remember, citation styles are basically codes that we understand. You know, when I look at parentheses and see a name and a number, I know this is the author, this is the page. So you have to use what is relevant in your discipline. You have to use the latest edition, unless told otherwise. You know, there is now a 7th or an 8th edition of the MLA. Use the 8th edition, unless told otherwise. That in the department we have agreed to use this, that, we are. Again, you have to use it consistently. You can't modify. I mean, the latest edition of the MLA is very, very simple. I mean, next to each type of source used, it tells you at the end what type it is. So it's a printed book. It tells you print. If you got it from the internet, it tells you web. And in that case, you don't have to give the URL. So a lot of people use it because it's easier. You can't use this sometimes because you don't have the URL, and other times because you have the URL, you mix up. No. You have to stick to one style and agree from the start. This is what you're going to use. Now, a lot of the mechanics of citation and bibliography get very confused. You know, what information do I include? How do I distinguish a journal article from a chapter in a book, etc., etc.? What is the answer for this? You sit and buy the MLA, you go home and sit and memorize it? Word for word? Or you can't do that. What do you do? Okay, check for the purpose of finalizing the list. But if you want to learn, read. The more research you read, the more the mechanics get assimilated. You know, you don't think about it because you see it all the time. You know, the more you expose yourself to journal articles, the more you know how a journal article cites information. The more you look at book chapters and other people, I mean, often in every chapter we read or in every periodical article we read, there is a bibliography and the end. This is not negative. This is for you to learn more about style and to get more interested in other readings and to know what the most recent writing is. So again, it's something that the more you practice it, the more you learn it, the more you internalize it. It becomes part of the codes that you use. You know, you write an article the first time, maybe you need to check the MLA. Second time around, you check it. Third time around, you know the rules, and you can speak with authority. This is the edition that I'm using, and I don't want. I mean, I'm not using the late edition.
And most of these are available now online. You can get them online.
Very basic information are available online. I was trying a few days ago to find the MLA online. Now they give you samples of very basic information because they sell the actual style sheet. You know, so you want to make the money. But they give you basic information. And there are a lot of places on the internet that can help you with this. I mean, I was going to talk to you more about this tomorrow as we do the general consultation. But the Purdue University website, OWL, it's Purdue, P-U-R-D-U-E. It's a fantastic, I mean, they have fantastic writing lab with all these questions that may come to your mind. You know, how to write an abstract, what should be there, I mean, what is plagiarism, how to avoid it, certain resources online, how to use the MLA, etc., etc. I mean, again, it may need to be www.purdue.edu. I think easier if you go to the Purdue Writing Lab, or even put in Google OWL, you know, Purdue OWL. It takes you directly there. There's plenty of resources, and the fun part is you can use it. I mean, they tell you, they have, like a lot of websites will have a disclaimer, do not use this without copyright permission, right? They tell you this is there for the general good, it's in the public domain, use it. You know, in teaching, in presentations, etc. So there's a lot of material that you can use even with, I mean, those of you who teach with your students if you want to show something. Now the very, very, very last part is the first element that we mentioned, which is the abstract. Now, having come that far in your proposal, you should easily write an abstract. Just remember, your abstract, again, it's a replacement of your proposal if you want to tell someone what your proposal is about. Now, if later on you're going to apply, I mean, you're doing an MA here, and now you're going to apply for a PhD in a university abroad, what you will tell them about your research is the abstract that you have written for the proposal. Of course, you may modify it later because research gets modified. But at this stage in the proposal, you need to answer the three basic questions. The what, why, how. You know, this thesis looks at kaza. This is important because it does kaza, and I do it through using this methodology and these. And of course, it's an abstract, so sure, it's usually again one paragraph, it's usually again in the vicinity of 100 to 150 words, not more than that. But you have to be very selective. You know, sometimes your methodology is 3-4 paragraphs. You don't want to put that, you want to put a sentence or two in the abstract. You want to briefly identify your work. And of course, abstracts are written to tell people what you are doing, what you have done. So in the abstract, you want to highlight your contribution towards the end. You know, that this is a special piece of research because it does this step. This is innovative in a sense. This contributes to the field in this way. I think with this, we've covered pretty much everything that we wanted to cover for today.
One thing too, very briefly, you don't have to put what, why, and how in the abstract in the same order of what, why, and
Of course
how.
not.
Because this is exactly I got it from what you said at the end, so it's that you want to highlight your contribution, so maybe you want to put the why at the end. Yeah, so I'm going to do this through that. I'm going to study these two works through post-colonial theory in order to, and this is my contribution.
And as we've seen throughout the session, and the two sessions today, you're not really doing the why, what, and how. They're just ordered anywhere. You know, you need to be aware of them. You need to have understood them yourself. But then when you write, you're following the format. You're following this specific format, right? So, I mean, you move between why, what, how, back to why, etc., depending on what category you're responding to in that format. But they should be in your mind. I think if you want, we have room for some questions. If you have questions, if you don't have anything, you're free to type.
Think about things, posing questions. I mean, we're here, we're staying, but your questions now. There will be time also tomorrow for a general recap at the beginning of the session, and you will also listen to questions. Anybody who has questions now, please.
I have a question on the bibliography. Because you said that sometimes there are primary sources and secondary sources. I'd like to know what's the most recent form. Do they have, do they include the primary and the secondary sources or not? And in my case, if my focus is theory, do I put the books that are on the theory as primary sources? I mean, I get very confused when writing the bibliography distance. And in the end, I didn't write primary and secondary. I took them all. So
But there's no acceptable style. You know, I mean, I use the MLA all the time, and I use works cited in the MLA, and they don't distinguish. They don't distinguish.
Yes,
We
the one I have doesn't.
present online, they don't distinguish. Audio, video material, CD-ROMs. I mean, sometimes you have to explain to your reader CD-ROM because otherwise they would not understand that they would think that this is a book. So we put it in the end. But these are special cases. If it's an unpublished dissertation, you explain. If it's a personal interview, you explain. But basically, in the order, the only order that decides for you how to do the list is alphabetical. Nothing. Having said that, however, الدراسات العليا ممكن في وقت معين يطلبوا حاجة معينة. Now, we are bound because we're submitting this form to Government of Canada, we're bound by the requirements of the الدراسات العليا. So you need to check at the time.
And for your thesis as well. If the thesis also they require primaries or no primaries. I think now primaries also are not very much required.
I think pretty much everyone uses works cited at the end of the thesis period. You know, you use a technical reference inside, and you put a list of works cited, comprehensive list of works cited first.
So I don't include the cited very good bibliography? Like, do I have two separate things? A bibliography and a website?
Where? In the thesis?
No, in the proposal.
In the proposal, now, as a requirement, I see bibliography على بعض. Yeah, what you quoted and what you didn't.
I think for the thesis you don't write this work set.
For the thesis, sometimes people do works consult. Because I think, and the standard is works cited.